What would you do if 3 guys told you that you didn't belong somewhere you'd earned the right to be 10 times over? Would you argue? Would you walk away? Or would you let your skills do the talking? That's exactly what happened to a decorated combat veteran who showed up at a military training facility in Arizona. The trainees took one look at her and decided she must be lost. What they didn't know was that she'd earned a nickname in actual combat that even special operators respected. And in just a few hours, she was about to deliver the most devastating lesson those overconfident students would ever receive. Before we show you exactly how she demolished their assumptions without saying a single word, drop a comment and let us know where you're watching from. And if you love stories about underdogs who prove everyone wrong, make sure you hit that subscribe button. The Arizona desert doesn't mess around. When the sun beats down on Fort Sentinel, the heat radiates off the concrete like you're standing inside an oven. On this particular morning, the training yard was already shimmering by 7 a.m., and a woman stood at the edge, watching soldiers fall into formation. She wasn't tall, maybe 5'6". She wasn't imposing. Her uniform was basic field gear. No ribbons, no badges, nothing that screamed experience or authority. Just plain camouflage that blended into the background. That's exactly how she wanted it. Her name was Riley Vos, and she'd been invited to Fort Sentinel as a guest instructor for a specialized combat readiness program. But nobody here knew that. Nobody knew anything about her except that she was a woman, and in their minds, that was all the information they needed. To them, she probably drove trucks or worked in administration. Maybe she was a medic. Definitely not someone who'd been downrange doing the kind of work that keeps you up at night. The truth was a lot different. Riley had completed 2 full combat deployments with a cultural support team, which sounds harmless until you realize these teams were embedded directly with special operations units, conducting some of the most dangerous missions in theater. She'd gone through selection alongside Green Berets and Rangers. She'd failed twice before finally passing in the top 15%. And when she deployed to Ardak province, she'd earned respect the hardest way possible, by saving lives and taking them when necessary. But standing here in the Arizona heat, none of that mattered. All anyone saw was a quiet woman who probably shouldn't be here. 3 students approached her near the range office on her second day. They were prior service guys, going through advanced leadership training, the type who thought they'd seen it all. One of them, a thick-necked specialist named Duran, looked her up and down like she was lost. "You need directions to admin?" he asked with a smirk. His buddies laughed. Riley didn't respond. She'd learned a long time ago that arrogance doesn't deserve your breath. She just stood there, calm, letting their ignorance hang in the air. They walked away, chuckling, convinced they'd made their point. Later that day, during a tactical briefing, the lead instructor introduced Riley as a guest advisor with combat experience. Duran leaned over to his friend and muttered, loud enough for everyone to hear, that her combat experience probably meant handing out supplies at some forward operating base. More laughter rippled through the room. The instructor said nothing. Nobody corrected him. Riley felt the sting of dismissal, but her face stayed neutral. It wasn't anger she felt. It was exhaustion, the bone-deep kind that comes from having to prove yourself over and over to people who never earned half your scars. Growing up in Wyoming, Riley had been raised by parents who believed in preparation over luck. Her father was a Marine Corps sniper instructor who had her running rifle drills before she hit double digits. By 14, she could field strip an M4 blindfolded. By 16, she was out shooting grown men at the county range. Her parents never told her she couldn't do something because she was a girl. They told her to be twice as good and let the results do the talking. That philosophy had carried her through everything. Through basic training, through selection, through 2 deployments where she'd breached doors, pulled security, and treated wounded teammates under fire. She'd never hesitated, not once. The moment that defined her happened in a small village in Ardak province. Her unit was pulling back under heavy fire when 4 insurgents opened up from a narrow alley. Riley was on rear security. She saw the muzzle flashes, felt the rounds snap past her head, and reacted on pure instinct. 2 shot center mass dropped the first target before he even cleared the doorway. The second wore body armor and took 3 rounds. The third tried to flank. She caught him mid-stride at 40 meters with a headshot. The fourth turned to run. She didn't let him get far. 12 seconds. 4 hostiles eliminated. 0 friendly casualties. The platoon chief had stared at her in stunned silence afterward. He didn't need to say anything. From that moment on, she wasn't just another CST soldier. She was Ghost. The operators gave her that name, and they meant it. She moved quiet, struck fast, and never missed. She came home with 2 bronze stars with valor and a reputation that followed her like a shadow. But here at Fort Sentinel, surrounded by people who'd never heard a round fired in anger, none of that existed. She was just a woman in the wrong place, and that was all they cared to see. The real moment of truth came during mission planning for the upcoming exercise. The scenario was a simulated hostage rescue using training ammunition, live targets, and strict time limits. Captain Maddox, the senior officer running the program, laid out the plan and asked for feedback. Riley raised her hand and pointed out a critical flaw. The approach Rudy D. chosen would leave the assault team completely exposed to enemy fire from an elevated position. She suggested an alternate flanking route that used natural cover and would cut nearly 30 seconds off their response time. Specialist Duran cut her off before she could finish. "Real gunfights aren't video games," he said dismissively. "Maybe let people with actual trigger time handle tactics." Captain Maddox didn't shut him down. He just moved on like she hadn't spoken. Riley sat back in her chair, jaw tight. What none of them knew was that she'd run that exact type of mission 14 times in Ardek province. She'd breached compounds under fire, cleared buildings with special operators, and coordinated live assaults in conditions these students couldn't imagine. But here, in an American classroom, her experience didn't matter. Her gender did. That evening, she sat alone in her quarters watching the Arizona sky burn red and gold through her window. She thought about that ambush, about the weight of her rifle, about the moment she'd realized 4 men were trying to kill her team and she was the only one in position to stop them. She thought about the silence that followed, the kind that only comes after violence, when your ears are ringing and your hands are shaking and you're rechecking to make sure everyone is still breathing. She'd proven herself in the worst conditions imaginable, but somehow, she still had to do it again. The combat readiness tests started at dawn. 60 students, split into teams of 6. The mission was straightforward. Infiltrate a simulated enemy compound, neutralize hostile targets, rescue a hostage, and extract under fire. The exercise used training ammunition inside a certified shoot house with safety officers and full protective gear. Captain Maddox assigned Riley as an observer. Just watch. Evaluate. Stay out of the way. The first 3 teams went through the course exactly how Riley had warned them not to. Then came Duran's team. He led from the front, loud and cocky, moving straight up the main approach, just like Riley had said not to. The elevated shooters lit them up. Half his team was eliminated before they even reached the door. Furious, Duran cursed his teammates and stormed off the range. Captain Maddox called everyone together and asked what went wrong. Silence. Nobody wanted to admit the plan had failed. Finally, a range officer spoke up. Maybe someone should demonstrate how it should be done. Maddox scanned the group, his eyes locked on Riley. "Think you can do better?" he asked, voice carrying a quiet challenge. Riley met his stare. "Yes, I can." 10 minutes later, after the safety brief and radio clearance, Riley stepped onto the range. Alone. No squad. No backup. Just her. An M4, loaded with training rounds, body armor, and a full face shield. She moved fast, no hesitation. She followed the flanking route she'd recommended, staying low, using terrain for cover. Approaching from the blind side, the elevated position never spotted her. 2 controlled shots per target. Smooth. Precise. Surgical. 8 seconds. Position clear. She advanced on the compound, bypassing the main entrance completely. Instead, she slipped through a side window, rolled inside, and came up before the targets could react. 15 seconds. 3 rooms cleared. Every shot hit vital zones, every movement efficient. No wasted motion. In the final room, she found the hostage dummy, slung it over her shoulder, and began her extraction. As she moved out, a final enemy position opened fire from 45 meters away. She dropped flat, used the dummy for partial cover, and returned fire. 3 shots, 3 kills. Total time, 2 minutes, 18 seconds. 0 casualties. Perfect execution. The range went dead silent. 60 students stood frozen as she walked off the course like she'd just finished her morning run. Specialist Daran stared with his mouth hanging open. Captain Maddox checked the timer twice, like it had to be wrong. Riley cleared her weapon, slung it, and walked right past Diran without a glance. She didn't need to say anything. The scoreboard said it all. That evening, Maddox called her into his office. No small talk. He simply asked why she hadn't told anyone about her background. I shouldn't have to, Riley said. My record speaks for itself. If people choose not to listen, that's their problem. Maddox nodded, then updated the training orders. Effective immediately, Riley would serve as lead instructor for the rest of the week. Daran and his team were assigned directly under her supervision. The next morning, before training began, Daran approached her. He didn't exactly apologize, but he asked her to walk him through the approach she'd used. She did. She showed him the angles, explained the cover and timing, demonstrated how small adjustments in movement could cut exposure time in half. Daran listened. Really listened. For the first time, he wasn't seeing a woman. He was seeing a warrior. By the end of the week, every student was running the course using Riley's methods. Pass rates jumped from 42% to 81%. Captain Maddox filed a commendation. Before she left, Daran shook her hand and admitted he'd been wrong. Riley appreciated it. It didn't erase the disrespect, but it meant something. She packed her gear and headed home to Wyoming. The base would forget her name eventually, and that was fine. She never did any of this for recognition. She did it to prove that skill has no gender, that ability can't be measured by appearance, and that the loudest voice in the room isn't always the most capable. Riley Voss didn't need anyone's belief. She just needed people to stay out of her way long enough to show them what real competence looked like. And every single time someone doubted her, every single time someone assumed she didn't belong, she proved them wrong without raising her voice or making excuses. She proved them wrong by being better, and that's a lesson that sticks forever. So here's the question. If you were in Riley's position, constantly underestimated and dismissed, would you have the discipline to stay silent and let your work speak? Or would you demand respect up front? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if this story reminded you that actions speak louder than words, make sure you share it with someone who needs to hear it. We'll see you in the next one.